Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now, here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhaj. Thanks for tuning in again to Authentic Living with Roxanne. Today I'm going to say a pretty special couple that I've been privileged that they would spend the time with me today. So it's Marla and Dave Thomas. How are you today?
We're good.
Fine. Thank you, Roxanne, for having us.
Well, I'm always looking for unique guests, and my team was able to kind of connect with them on an interface that we use, which is podcast guests. And why I think it's important, oftentimes most people don't discuss mental health. And when you see people in the limelight, I think it's even more so that when you come forward and you share your experience, that helps that much more because you've got platforms. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them and why they're so unique in what they do. Marla, they're both are in different industries. Marla is a respected realtor and a vocal mental health advocate, which is amazing. And Dave is a renowned musician, a 10-time Grammy Award-winning group Take Six. They have 2 children, and they deal with 7 different mental health diagnoses. That's a lot. 1 is a lot, but 7 of them. You've been through a lot in your marriage, and you've endured being in the limelight. And getting together today is really to talk about just lives. And I would say that oftentimes, first of all, I can tell you as someone that's couples and family therapist, anybody above 7 years of marriage has hit a home run. And because today, in this day and age, what we know is that a lot of people struggle without any concerns to stay married at about 65%. Not that being said, I'm not trying to deter anybody that's married at present, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot. So we're going to talk a little bit today about their lives and hear what they can share with us that we can learn about being in the limelight, having a long-term marriage, and also keeping their families together and keeping their kids healthy. So tell me a little bit about, first of all, I always ask couples this when I meet them. How did you two meet?
We met in 2nd grade, but before I say anything, I have to, because this is important for the record, we are the parents of 3 children. You said
Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, we have 2 children who have mental health challenges that are noted, but our 3rd does not. So we've got a 30-year-old, a 34-year-old, and a 36-year-old.
Thank you for
a 13-year-old grandson. So I got to give credit to all our little, love.
Of course.
All right,
you're gonna hear. I'm probably gonna have to alter this if it should go out saying 2. So thanks for telling me that.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
I got too many stretch marks to claim 2. So we met in 2nd grade. I was 6 years old. He was 8. I don't know why he was in the 2nd grade.
I don't know why she says that. At
truth.
the beginning of the year, I was 7.
Sorry. He turned 8.
but yes, for dramatic purposes, 6 and 8. Yes.
Yeah, he was driving carpool. He had a 5 o'clock shadow. It was really weird. But anyway, we were in 2nd grade. We met at a small private school in Huntsville, Alabama. And then, through the years, once you get, go through your little, puberty and attraction stage and whatever, he and I dated. We became high school sweethearts. And then my parents got divorced when I was in the 10th grade. And I moved on to back with my mother in California, which for me introduced a new relationship that ultimately produced a child, which he was unaware of, but was determined in 10th grade that we were going to get married. And I was like, you're ridiculous. Don't be silly. And we did get back together when she was 1 with a very detrimental relationship that I had dissolved, and we got married, and we ended up so we've been married for 35 years.
Wow.
We'll be 36 in March. And
Amazing.
Right. Now we're the parents of 3 children that, and we've raised My daughter was 1 when we got married. Exactly.
Right.
And then we had our son and our youngest daughter. And so, my oldest daughter also currently has our only grandson, but our youngest daughter is also pregnant. So in 5 weeks' time, we'll be meeting our second grandson, and we're excited about that.
Indeed.
Wow, amazing expanding the family.
Yeah,
and Doc, I have to first of all agree with you on one hand, and then add another step in the ladder when you said if you make it past 7, you can cruise a little bit. I would dare say between 15 and 22, you're going to hit another rung in the ladder that you're going to have to decide what are we actually doing here. And
that's been proven, Dave, because they figure every 5 to 7 years, approximately in a relationship, there's a new developmental stage where different things come about in the marriage. Right. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense what you're saying. And I think a lot of young couples, and I think this is what's important, is a lot of couples think it's just gonna happen and they don't have to work. And in fact, your stories hopefully will help young couples or couples that are, struggling, recognize some of the things that they might have to do.
Right. I say all the time, I equate it to, so you have a nice lawn that looks well maintained. Stop maintaining it and see what happens. Does it get nicer? Does it just stay the way it is? After a while, it becomes a mess that you can't deal with. And so anytime I hear someone say that they've been in a long-term relationship, I understand struggle is already implicit in that statement. And not just struggle, but a commitment to look at the struggle in an appropriate way to decide what's important and what am I willing to deal with in order to maintain this commitment. And a lot of times in our society today, that is not valued. I worked with the Backstreet Boys, and I was talking to one of them, and he was, asked the same question, how did you stay, in a committed married relationship? He's had way more success than I have. He said, the funny thing about it is people don't ask or take notice when your relationship is going just fine.
It's only when
the entertainment industry actually focuses on problems that you're having, which tends to exacerbate the problem. So, kudos to him. He was able to keep his marriage sort of out of the limelight by actually committing to staying committed in his relationship.
So let's continue on that vein. You were on the road, as a kind of a celebrity, you're in a band. How did you make that work? Now that you're saying that, obviously, with celebrities, we often, see people kind of going through marriage after marriage, or they're, 1 week they're together and next week they're not together and next week they're back together. Well, how did you two maintain that?
Cycling for love.
Cycling for love.
Right. Well, the issue for me, here's what I'll say this. I'll say that on an individual basis, that I understand several things inherently. Number one, who you are and what you do are 2 totally different things. Period. It doesn't matter. And there are some leveling things that are kind of basic but true for me. Did you get born out of someone's uterus? Me too. Do you go to the bathroom? Me too. And so therefore, that's a level playing field in my mind for all of us. That means that I don't own your judgment. And the more you're judging me, which is why I think we have the issues we have now, you're judging people based on something in you that is not really realized. In other words, there's so much work I have to do on Marla. I honestly don't have time to be consumed with and with enough energy to hate your situation enough, not knowing it, to respond to it. So for me, my thing is, okay, so this is where we are. It's not this that you see is what has been accomplished. It doesn't speak to the person that's there, period. And so for me, you're gifted enough to do something that most people can appreciate. But here's the other thing I realized. When you encounter a human, we just encountered each other, right off the bat, whether I want to or not, subconsciously, I've gotten an impression of you.
Absolutely.
Period. We get an impression right off cuff. And I tell people, you can either turn somebody's head to the right or the left just with a brief encounter. Everybody doesn't get into your heart circle. Mm-hmm. But the reality is this is what happens when you live and you encounter life. And so it's just super important for me to understand that about ourselves. And then you bring a different element of humanness, a humanity, a deep core package that we've all been given, that we're working hard every day now to deny these basics: compassion and, sympathy and respect, morality. We're working hard to just say they don't matter, but they do. And that's how great relationships are built, because all of those things feed into respect, feed into communication, feed into an acceptance and a healing.
And I would add to that, I would like to say that it is the fact that I value my family so much that it kept me in a place where I needed to be. But in reality, no one is trained, I don't think, sufficiently. I mean, you got to pass a test, you got to study to get your driver's license, you got to pass a test to become whatever profession usually you are if you're going to be in the professional world. You have to demonstrate your competency. But people have kids, and next thing you know, you're learning on the job. To the most important job that you can have, you haven't really been trained outside of the way that you were raised yourself. Sometimes that's great, sometimes it isn't. Same thing with relationships. A lot of times we look at the basis of relationship as attraction. Well, anyone who's been married for successfully, whether successfully or not, if you've been in a committed relationship for a long time, you understand that attraction, matter of fact, the very things that used to attract you are the very things that make you the most upset after a while.
Yes, for sure. Those are often times where couples have the most conflict, right?
Absolutely.
Whatever they're attracted to, they're like, "Oh, you're so outgoing," and then it's like, "Oh my God, you never want to stay home when you get settled, right?" Or you're so quiet. Oh my God, speak up. Why don't you speak up? Right. So that we're always trying to neutralize ourselves. That's a good point, Dave. We're always trying to figure out. So whatever our least dominant trait is within ourselves, we look for it in our partners. So
absolutely
that we get that equilibrium. Now, for you, you're out there, you're doing things, you're getting the accolades, and to Marla's point, you're not defined by what you do. You are a person, but then you go into obviously something that's revered, right? Being in celebrity, being blessed, I would say, to be able to do what you do. Yes. How did you stay grounded when you came back home? What kind did you have rituals? Was there certain things that you did as a couple to really kind of help you come back down?
Get my big needle that I use to deflate his head. It's around here somewhere.
Well, for me, I was raised in a large family, and in a large family, people have various talents, and those talents are just recognized for just what you said, what you do, not who you are. We're all just members of the family. And as well as, I'll drop this little anecdote. One time I was coming home off the road, been gone on tour for quite some time, and Marla was running such a well-oiled machine of the administration of the household that she was just telling one of our kids to go do this, go get this, go such and such. Dave, you need to go out and you need to such and such. And after a while, I was like, wait a minute, are you telling me what to do? And she basically said she handled it very well, which, she could have just said, absolutely, I am, shut up. But what she said is that, you have to understand, and I understand as a man how you like to perceive things. But what you have to understand is when you leave, there's no person wearing the skirt and another person wearing the pants. I'm wearing the skirt and the pants. Mm-hmm. And when you come home, if you come home for a week after being gone for 2.5, 3 months, and then leave again for another 2 months, it's inefficient for me to take off the pants and hand them to you, because I have to spend all the time showing you how the household actually runs. And you have no idea. So, if you could do me a favor and just fall back, And at first I was like, wait a minute, I'm not sure how to take that. But the more I thought about it, I was like, she's absolutely correct. And so, a lot of times I would get, joked by my friends, oh, your wife wears the pants in the family. And I'm like, after a while, she kind of does, and she needs to.
Right. And I think that's so important, right? Because of course, when we wear our males in a certain way, and I know we're having the equality, but at the end of the day, right, men need to feel like they are, quote unquote, taking care of their family. So the delivery that Marla may have put this in, you again had to shuttle to accept that space to see, hey honey, I understand what you're saying, instead of, what, I'm not going to listen to you, this is my house. So again, that's the subtleties, especially with newer couples, because they may have grown up, let's say, with traditional families, and now you have, both of them are professionals, or both are traveling or whatever. So they might use their parents as a model in their head, and they're trying to kind of figure it out. And now it's not working for them. So, and
Absolutely.
then clearly, like your situation, I would think that this is completely new for both of you. You didn't grow up in a family when one person was gone. You may have grown up with family.
Well, ironically,
I did.
Marla, I tell people all the time, it was almost just ordained that we would be together, because she was perfectly already suited for our lifestyle. Her dad was a professional baseball player, so during the baseball season, he wasn't home. So she was raised with this awareness that the dad doesn't always have to be here. At the same time, because of the way that she and her brother sort of behaved, she also knew, I can't let the kids get out of hand, because all kids will take advantage of any situation. They'll try to. I mean, it's our job when we're young to see where the cracks in the fence are, to try to make sure that those walls, those boundaries that our parents put up for our own sake, even when we don't understand it, are necessary. There might be a crack. She was pretty good at making sure that I was raised in one of those families where, if things got too deep, my mom's response was, okay, when your dad gets home, he's going to have to handle this. And of course, now you're terrorized for about, 6 or 7 hours till your dad gets home. But, for Marla, that wouldn't have worked, because as she was raised that way, her mom tried to say that from time to time, and she was like, well, Dad's not going to be back for 3 months.
I'm not listening to anybody. Nobody gets to tell me what to do. He's not even coming back till October. What are you talking about in June?
And so she understood all of that, and she was like, no, my kids aren't going to be able to do that.
By the way, shout out to Canada. And my dad, as one of his coaching career, my dad was with the Expos team.
Oh, wow.
Expos moved to the Nationals.
Moved to Washington.
Exactly.
Awesome. So if you can, we're talking about, I often say to people, a lot of times it's values alignment. I don't know if that makes sense, right? You have to be aligned as a couple. And I want you to give your perspective. I can give it as mine, but when you think of values or things that keeps you two connected, what are some of the core fundamental things that are at the foundation of keeping this marriage solid and strong? I'm sure it's weeble wobbled over the years, but
no, they haven't. To be honest, our tenets have been the same since the day we met. The number one tenet on the table for Marla and Dave and Marla would be selflessness. We are both equally selfless beings, and we both understood the hierarchy or the priority for our personal selves, which we shared collectively as a couple, and our children ruled, meaning they didn't rule our house as far as running amok, but they were our priority, to the point that nothing in this world that we ever accomplished, tried to achieve, nothing was above our dedication to the unconditional love and sacrifice of whatever they needed based on who they were, not what we were trying to make them. Ironically, this is a great truth to that. All 3 of our kids can sing. They're crazy talented in music, stupid talent. And I say ironic because my oldest daughter that's not her biological father, but even Moniece is super talented. And yet never, ever was that something that we drove, but whatever they wanted to do in life, based on my upbringing and what didn't happen for me, that was a goal to get behind them. So our youngest can sing anyone. Matter of fact, this is a true story. I was just getting my hair done, and they were talking about somebody notable in music, and I was like, "What? That's your top 5? Really? With all the people that can?" I said, "I put $100 on the table right now that my daughter, the baby, no one's ever heard of her, can out-sing this mega celebrity person." And I put on a song, and they thought it was coming from the TV. They were like, "Wait, what?" And so the point that I'm making is, but she wanted to do, she went to Syracuse. She got a formal education. She's a news producer. In other words, if it's not for you, sweetie, it's not for me. She was an actress when she was young. So what I'm saying is that's where we have the same shared value system as people first. And I have to say that to your audience. We didn't try to align ourselves. So what do you think we should do? What do you think we should be? I was already this little person as a little person. Like I was already the person who stared out the window at 8 years old in the car with my mother in an upper middle class town with the one homeless person that was there. And as we stopped at the light said, how come they're out there? They have to have somebody. There's got to be family somewhere. Like that was just my me. So understanding who you are. And then, one of the things I say about Dave, why it worked most importantly, I did have a baby coming into our relationship as permanence, meaning we'd been in and out. But he was flying home from a trip to Europe on an international Take 6 tour. And he said, well, I'm going to fly into Washington first. We were dating. We were not married. I said, what do you mean you're flying into Washington first? He goes, yeah, I'm gonna see my nieces and my nephews, and one of my nephews wants to ride back to Huntsville with me so he can spend time with his cousins. And I was like, so he said, I'm gonna go spend some time and then drive in with them. You know what I thought? I can't believe he's not spending time with me. I thought, man, that is bionic. These aren't even his kids. He's 22, but his nephews and nieces loved him like he was their dad. And so he literally took that time, and I thought, character. That's character. Like now I don't have to, even though I've known you growing up, now in this stage, I don't have to be scared of what you will or will not be to my daughter. Because other than that, that's for me as a mother, that was super important.
And I'll say this almost in reverse to the initial question that you asked before I even do that, I'll say that's one of Marla's, I would say her superpowers is a strange, innocent naivety, childlike innocence that she's been able to maintain throughout her entire life. It informs her sense of judgment, her sense of morality, her sense of everything that's right and wrong. If it's unfair, I don't care who it is. You could be the most important person. If you're treating somebody unfairly, she doesn't appreciate it, and she's going to let you know. That's the first thing. But I will say to your initial question, almost in reverse, a lot of times people think about, what do we have in common? It's not the actual things that you do and the things that you like to do that you have in common that actually matter. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's your value system. Does family come first? Does commitment, does friendship actually matter more than attraction? All those things are important and to understand. I was, lucky enough to have a dad who was also a psychotherapist. So, I should say lucky or unlucky because I've been therapized.
Depends on who you talk to. If you talk to my son, he says, "Oh boy, we're in the car. We're going for a ride."
Yes, as he's learning new techniques and stuff. Of course, we're the guinea pigs. So, matter of fact, I just finished a very intensive DISC assessment, and I'm sure you're aware of that. Yes. But I'm still learning more about myself every day. And what I started to realize is that not only do I have the normal male tendencies that needs to be appreciated, so to speak, that's part of my personality as well. I need to be appreciated. And I also need to have the security of understanding that when we're going through an issue, when we're dealing with something that, one of us perceives as negative and we have to deal with it. But as long as I can feel that it's not going to diminish the value of our relationship, we can deal with it. Once I feel like the relationship is on the line, it becomes more difficult for me to deal with.
Absolutely. And I think what happens to a lot of couples is, they polarize and they forget what it takes to make the other person feel safe, right? And then what happens is, instead of kind of leaning in, all you need is one person to lean in. But ideally, if you have both people recognizing, hey, what does Marla need to be safe and what does Dave need to be safe? Then what happens is, and I often say it's like a figure eight. You always have that cross section where you are able to have big disagreements, small disagreements, but not, have these what I call demon dialogues where you're cutting the other person off to such a point where you can't repair it. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the skills. They don't learn the skills. Unfortunately, they may not have been as lucky as you, where you're able to kind of stay centered on your values. And that, and then, in this day and age, it's not working well. Let's go. So I think it's really people just learning some basics, as learning to understand kind of who is the other person truly, to your point. And when the honeymoon and stage is over, do you really like that person?
Right.
I think that's what doesn't get taught, unfortunately. And in our society today, it's more about the opulent weddings and the where they're going on the honeymoon and the venue, and then a month later when the rubber hits the road, it's kind of like, oh boy, now this is real life. Now what do? We have to get off being on the social media platforms and stuff like that. So I think I think you're so right when you say it's that commonality, that bond of putting your children first that clearly helped you pave that way. So let's talk a little bit about mental health. And when you found out, what was that like? What did you do? And and of course I know you continue to do a lot today with mental health, but tell me a little bit about how you found out and what you've been dealing with.
I will say this: any parent, I'm going to speak strictly right now from a parent perspective, any parent who deals with mental illness in their adult children, this is not a new revelation. There are things that have been happening throughout this child's entire life that you may not have been able to put in a box.
Two older children, not just one.
Right. You may not have been able to put it in a box, but you knew that the behavior was extreme or different or outside of normal growing arcs and development. When we first actually found out formally for our son, his full diagnosis, when we really could put a grip on that, was 23. For our daughter Moniece, she was 21.
Almost. What was your son's diagnosis?
My son's diagnosis is bipolar 1 with schizoaffective, and Moniece had multiple diagnoses: depression, anxiety, borderline personality. But I have to give a caveat here. We usually don't talk about her diagnosis as openly as we talk about his, on purpose, because she sees this as an attack. She sees this as a deficit. She sees it as a negative. And I'm going to explain why I say it. And to be honest, we've, in several interviews, you're the only person I've said it with, and I'm only saying it to you because you're a psychologist, to be honest. I find that it pushes me as her mother to pray that it brings compassion, because if you keep behaving the way you're behaving as an adult and you expect this behavior to be received as norm, there's no compassion in it. But if you understand that she has a different psychological issue, then I'm hoping to spark compassion beyond what I can personally bring in control, because she is public. And so that's my prayer, that you won't respond to it. It's a scary thing, to be honest. I'm a frightened mom, knowing that we understand and withstand the disrespect, all the things that are triggering and sparking to most people. But yet, as a 36-year-old woman who is doing these things, if I can get someone to understand, and I'll give you a true antidote. Some of the behaviors have been so damaging. And at one point in our lives, she had a friend that, she's in and out with people all the time. Bridges are always on fire. And this bridge had been burned. And the young lady, my daughter said to this young lady, unfortunately her child had passed in a car accident, and the car seat was not properly fitted. And the young lady lost her 2-year-old. And my child said, your baby died because you didn't deserve to be a mom. And, and the girl called me to inform me, I have a lot of respect for you. And I'm like, I'm gonna kill your child. I'm gonna kill her. When I see her, when I find her, this is what's gonna happen. And what I said to this young lady is, listen, I'm a mom. I understand fully what you're saying. I said, however, I want you to think for a minute about your own life. Because even if you find it justified emotionally, it's still a crime. Mm-hmm. And do you want to lose your life? Is she worth that for you? And so that's kind of what I'm really saying. What I'm saying is there's things that I have to consider that are so much bigger than the obvious, also to protect her from herself. So right. She doesn't like this diagnosis, which is the last diagnosis Dave and I got. If there's something else that's been added onto that, I can tell you what we know professionally as we have invested in our children to get answers to help them manage their own selves. So, and I understand her, I defend the fact that I get why she doesn't want that, because certain things are not there. They're so stigmatized that it causes a get away from me factor, where some things are somewhat now slowly embraced. Anxiety and depression are the darling.
That's almost normative now, but borderline disorder,
borderline personality, PD, bipolar, those things, schizophrenia, things that
those things sound scary to the general public,
and they seem
don't have the education
by their behavior. It's frightening. Mm-hmm. When you look at borderlines, I know like the one of the characters on the hit back in the day, Fatal Attraction, that personality base was based on that. Well, that's a scary thing to consider. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, to say I'm this, and you also don't have a sense of self, and this is your whole identity. So in Monice's defense, I understand why she's not so readily able, aside with the fact that she has, these issues, to say, hey, guess what? I'm also this.
Right. And I think that's a good point, right? Like they are, even as myself, knowing what someone's diagnoses are, what I would say is, okay, this is, you struggle with this, but this is not who you are.
You are. Correct.
This is what you're coping with. And as a family, clearly you have to learn how to deal with it, to effectively create the place of safety for her, as she's not feeling what she might take some actions, and trying to help her get the right supports obviously is important, right? And I think that's what it is with someone like myself that's done the work. You recognize it. It's ultimately about connection. It's about creating safety for them. And, it's like a diabetic that says, no, I won't take my medication. You can say, you're not going to not take your medication. It's the same thing. And I think, I often say, picking the field, and I've been in this field since I was 21, I'll say I would love the day when we can go to a psychologist or a psychotherapist's office and all sit in the waiting room waiting our turn, like we do a physician.
Right.
Because that will eventually mean that we've all accepted that our bodies and our minds and our brains are one, and truly they are. But we're so like, oh, it's secretive. We can't say what address we have. We can't have
back door. I'm in the lobby. You exit out the back. You're never seen by the next person. That's a fact. That's a good one.
Exactly. But I think, now that we're recognizing, and we can learn so much from the East around, our brain and our mind are one and the same as our body. And we have to really educate people about, we can't separate one from the other, right? We have to accept that these are things that are, they're treatable with the right kind of support, with the right kind of learning, so that the average person out there doesn't say, oh, I'm afraid.
Right. And I always say that I'm looking forward to the day when things are so destigmatized that just like you go to the dentist, whether you need to go to the dentist or not, it's prevented. You go to make sure that you're maintaining your oral health. Sometimes with a checkup, especially when you're younger, you go to the doctor to make sure that you're developing properly. Why don't we go to our therapist to make sure that we're seeing the world in the proper perspective, and to maybe potentially, if need be, to recognize that this person is not seeing the world the way the consensus norm is, and we might need to make some adjustments there. These things need to be so normative that it's something that we can almost take for granted. And, unfortunately, we're not there yet. And so we are forced in various ways, trying to force the issue and force people to understand. Sometimes, it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels cumbersome. Sometimes it feels like a struggle. Sometimes it always feels like a struggle. But sometimes you have to question yourself, why am I putting myself through this?
Right.
Because, for my wife, she's received death threats just from being on Love and Hip Hop and the way that she's interacted with. And the key is, I don't know anyone who had someone that they loved that they would not be willing to continue to try to get to a successful result, for a successful outcome for that person and for your relationship. We're to the point now where even if our children if they can get the help that they need and they choose not to deal with us, we prefer you to get the help that you need. The issue is, you're the most important thing to us. And it's starting to feel like that value system in America is diminishing. And I'm trying to figure out, how can we get back to that?
Well, I may be as basic as they come, but I go back to, I think it's all about love, and us just going back to that core fundamental, like when Marla said, having that anchor within yourself, to realize that we're all different. None of us had, came from ideal, perfect upbringings where we had, everything optimally available to us. Like, I grew up in a family that was not a good marriage. Parents did the best they could. Of course, you're going to have shrapnel associated with things that have happened. But, and I think if we look at that and say, there's mental distress all the way up to mental health, and any of us can get to that point, right? And when you see, right, that spectrum, and especially if you're not supporting people, getting them the right kind of help, like DBT, or different kinds of supports for mental health, the correct medication, different kinds of interactional groups, then what we're doing as a society is we're not being kind and gentle to everybody that needs that support. And if we look at it, things are on the rise. So if we don't start to look at what we need to do as a society, we're ultimately going to grow that problem.
Yeah,
not ultimately. We're there.
We're at the point now where we're starting to see more things that divide us than more things that can bring us together, and that division builds its own stress to where there's almost a group PTSD that is happening right in front of our eyes. That's a ball rolling downhill that we can't seem to stop, as we recognize and see it happening right in front of our faces. And so for us, there's a strength that is needed when you say that, it all comes back to love. Sometimes love requires more strength than to be reactive in a situation. Sometimes to not react in the way that the person is trying to get that interaction from you, that negative interaction, and to still be loving, you're putting your pride on the line. You're putting what people perceive as your self-worth on the line. You're putting everything on the line to maintain the fact that I believe that love is more important than this division. And, we need help in that area as far as our society is concerned.
So now you have an organization that you work with. When I was reading your bio, tell me a little bit about it, and, how you help, and for anybody listening that, in what way they could support the organization or to move the needle forward. I often say we have to have more conscious conversations. We have to talk about bipolar. We have to talk about borderline. We have to talk about anxiety. We have to talk about depression. We have to talk about, as parents, what you should and shouldn't do. So tell me a little bit about the organization and how people, regardless of where they are, how they might be able to assist in any way.
So you pretty much hit on all the topics, all the focuses of what we do. Loving beyond reason is an organization designed to help support families like ours, which is loving your adult children and assisting them beyond what other people feel is reasonable. Because the system doesn't even think it's reasonable, because they don't offer you any support past 18. They don't offer you any resources past 18 without that person buying in, and even still, it's not complete. So what we realize is we've been an intact family who've done nothing but sacrifice and love our children, yet we're here. And that doesn't make us different. It makes me like everyone else, understanding that this is, I would never have imagined it. I would never wish this on my worst enemy. I don't want anybody else in this club. This club is awful. It's a club of heartbreak. It's a club of pain. We are a donation-based organization, and there's several initiatives, but the main initiative we have for our organization is that David and I are attempting to start our first, hoping to franchise ultimately, but our first Loving Beyond Reason transition home, which will offer a step-down residency to those who are in crisis who come out of the hospital, because right now there's a lot of boarding cares, and most that we've encountered through our experience directly with our son are the worst. And
abysmal.
Here's the thing.
They're unregulated. So, people are getting money from the government
Per
and
head.
not actually using that money to implement sufficient service
Correct.
to the clientele. And so, you get picked up by the police. Luckily, we're getting a little bit better at taking that person and not making them a criminal, and get them some mental health help. But at that time, they go to the hospital. The doctor might say, "I need you on a 5150 or a 5250 or a 5152," and that because I think this person needs at least 2 weeks of the medication to be titrated through the system
so they can stabilize
before they can be stabilized. But our health insurance system has not actually caught up here in the United States. Here in Canada, things might be a little bit
and
different.
let us say California.
And yeah, so because of that, and specifically Florida and California, and for various reasons, I'm sure Marla will get into in a minute. But before you can get to that 2 weeks of stabilization, the insurance cuts off at 6 days.
So you're back out on the street.
That's when you have to,
and you're not ready because you don't have the skills yet.
Matter of fact,
Obviously.
You're worse than before you went in, because now you're starting to see a little bit of something, but at the same time, you felt like you've been mistreated. So now you have on top of the issues that you were dealing with, a bit of PTSD, slipping in there, because you feel like you've been violated against your will. And so that's when you go to these step down programs that are unregulated, these board and cares, and we haven't had a good experience in that.
Yes.
So her mom, who used to run the VA for Southern California, chief of nurses, as well as she had with a foundation in psychiatric nursing. She designed a program for us that we could implement in our, soon to be the first Loving Beyond Reason home, where we can actually put some of the things in place that will take care of and nurture these people back to good health. And even if they don't have the chance to leave, they're not ready to go, they can stay as long as they want. It doesn't have to be insurance-based. It doesn't have to be the fact that you can pay. We need you to be stable before you go back into society.
Right. Amazing. Amazing. So for parents listening, whether they're in Europe, Canada, or in the US, and they're in the struggle.
Mm.
And what words of wisdom would you give to them, or words of comfort, or any guidance at all for them?
Silent suffering is suffering without the possibility of hope. I'm going to say that one more time. Suffering in silence, your choice to suffer in silence, does not diminish the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So silent suffering is suffering without the possibility of hope, because you've said nothing to anyone. And so no one can assist you in something that they don't know. I'm not talking about the internet. I'm not talking about getting online and sharing all your family's darkest, deepest issues. I'm talking about picking up the phone and calling NAMI. I'm talking about finding an outlet that is calling a psychologist. I'm talking about networking to be able to say to friends and or family, hey, what I'm dealing with here is deeper than what I even can recognize. Do you have anybody that can help me? That's the kind of breaking the silence I speak of. I don't want you to be me. I happen to be placed on a platform. That's not what I wanted to do with even my own life. I'm equipped for media, but I wasn't equipped or it wasn't a desire for me to come on, use media to have to deal with these types of issues. I've been placed here. So I have to say that because I need people to be very clear. My words are very clear as to what I think for help. Number 2, denial is death.
Mm-hmm.
You see what you see, you feel it, you intuit it, you know it as any connected parent understands what you're seeing is an issue, or you wouldn't even have a concern. And so the longer you deny, the more it is emotional destruction and death for your family, for you, loving the one who suffers and those who suffer. So it is natural, but it is something that you've got to get a grip of. See something, say something, do something.
And I would say, I would only add to that, resist the urge to lean into despair, because no matter how dark things can get better. And no matter how long it takes for the appropriate help to get there for you, don't despair, because the more you reach out, the more you have the opportunity for that help to reach you. So hang in there.
Amazing stuff. Like, wow, I'm blessed that you're taking this step to help others through adversity. That's the opportunity. Like you said, you didn't ask to be placed here, but you're doing something because you understand, right? Like you understand what the pain is. So for people wanting to reach out, where can they get a hold of you if they want to donate? Where do they go?
Lovingbeyondreason.org. There's a big giant donate button there. We're literally, believe it or not, even though we have been an established nonprofit since 2018, we're just now getting to the point of, we're a grassroots foundation and we're a donation-based foundation. But the work that we do is endless, even including Mental Health Mondays, which we've been doing for 3 years.
I saw that.
Yeah. So for us, for me, it's also super important that I am fully dedicated to educating families. I teach de-escalation, teaching families how to manage your loved one in an episodic crisis.
Specifically when the law enforcement needs to get involved. Correct. As well.
So right. To help you help yourself. Those education pieces are spoken by me. They're on my personal page. A lot of these really deep conversations that really are more about, we have a marriage and we have a life. But to be honest, my insights and inspiration and movement are different sometimes than Dave's. And this is what I've been born to do spiritually. So I feel like transparency is the only way to transformation. So you'll find that on Marla Talks. And ironically, God has allowed me, in my opinion, a vast array of traumatic experiences that I've been able to move through, because it is a way for me to share. My last series I just did was literally on my subscription in my Instagram was The Diary of a Madman. And I explained being inside of a narcissistic relationship that was actually dangerous with Monisa's dad before David and I got married, and what that was like. I've never spoken on it before, but now that this is, a lot of the climate is really focusing a lot on that. Like, you know what? I'm sure that my true story will help someone else in my demographic kind of understand this to a level, because you feel so isolated, and break free for themselves. And so it just keeps coming.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing that you do that. And I'm so grateful that I collided with you on Podcast Guests. What an inspiration you both are. And, what am I taking away? I'm taking away that we are given certain things in life, and we do the best that we can, especially as parents and as partners, right? And that in this case, mental health is like anything else. It's something that families cope with. A lot of families, to your point, cope in silence. and there's no need. There's no need. Pain is inevitable, but suffering need not be. So reach out, connect. We are not reptiles. We do not need to shut down. We need to connect. We need this eye connection, and that in of itself is so healing. And just being able to chat with someone that feels like they're in turmoil, that could be a gift that you could give someone just by a 5 or a 10-minute conversation. So for everyone listening, please reach out. Please help them out and donate. And for anyone needing to get a hold of me, please, you can also reach out. I talk about mental resilience in relationships at home and at work. You can go to roxannedurhage.com/quiz, where you'll do a quick quiz and we'll send you some information. Again, thanks so much for your time. Very grateful. And for everyone listening, we look forward to seeing you again next week.
And please keep these conversations going. I'm telling you, you're doing more good. It warms my heart to know that there are people who are genuinely invested in change. So thank you.
Thank you. You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhage.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.